The wind that morning was quiet, yet my heart was loud. I stood in front of my daughter Clara's house, my hand resting on the doorknob, smiling to myself. I had imagined this moment for hours. Linda, my wife, had come here 2 weeks ago to spend time with Clara and Ethan. I missed them all and thought it would be nice to surprise them. I had even brought a small box of Clara's favorite cookies, the kind she loved since she was a child. The street was peaceful. The sun was out, and the smell of cut grass hung in the air. Everything seemed calm, almost too calm. As I reached for the handle, a sudden shout broke the stillness. "Henry, stop! Don't open that door!" I turned around fast. It was Mrs. Griffin, the old lady who lived next door. She was rushing across the lawn, her gray hair blowing in the wind, her face pale like she had seen a ghost. She waved her hands, shouting again. "Stop! You can't go in there! You need to know the truth first!" I froze. My first thought was that something had happened to Clara. My heart jumped into my throat. "What are you talking about?" I asked. But she didn't answer. She kept coming closer, out of breath, clutching her chest. "Please," she said between heavy breaths, "don't touch that door." Before I could speak again, a sound cut through the air, the deep wail of sirens. I turned my head and saw 2 police cars speeding down the street, lights flashing red and blue. A few neighbors peeked out of their windows. One man across the road stepped out onto his porch, whispering something to his wife. The police cars stopped right in front of Clara's house. Officers jumped out, moving quickly but quietly, their faces serious. I didn't understand what was going on. My hands were shaking now. I tried to speak, but no words came out. Mrs. Griffin placed her hand on my arm. Her eyes filled with fear. "Henry," she said softly, I think you're about to see something terrible." Her words sank into me like ice. I turned back toward the door, staring at it. The handle looked so normal, but suddenly I was afraid to touch it. I could hear faint noises inside the house, footsteps, maybe voices, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. I wanted to call out Clara's name, but something in my gut told me not to. An officer approached me. "Sir, please step back," he said firmly. "We need to handle this." "Handle what?" I asked, my voice cracking. "My wife and daughter are in there." He paused and looked at me. "We'll explain everything soon," he said, and then turned to his partner. They moved toward the front door, weapons ready, eyes focused. Mrs. Griffin was crying now, quietly, whispering to herself. "I told them this would happen. I told them." My chest tightened. My legs felt weak. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Police cars, flashing lights, neighbors staring all around my daughter's quiet little home. I took one slow step forward, clutching the cookie box tighter, as if it could somehow hold me together. And as I stood there on that calm, sunlit morning, watching the police enter the house, I knew that whatever waited behind that door would change my life forever. 2 weeks earlier, life was calm. Linda and I were having breakfast when she mentioned going to visit Clara and Ethan. She said Clara needed help around the house, something about sorting out the guest room and fixing some curtains. I remember smiling and telling her, "That's good. She'll be happy to have you around." Linda smiled back, but her eyes didn't. There was something behind that smile I couldn't quite place. Maybe tiredness. Maybe something else. She packed her bag that same evening. Before leaving, she hugged me quickly, kissed my cheek, and said, "I'll call you when I get there." I watched from the porch as she drove off, waving until her car disappeared down the road. The house felt strangely empty after she left. For the first few days, I tried to keep busy working on a small table in my shed, watching some old movies, but every now and then, I'd glance at my phone, waiting for her call. When she did call, her voice sounded cheerful, but distant. I could hear background noise, maybe laughter, maybe music. "Everything's fine," she'd say. "We've been busy." She never stayed on the phone long. By the 4th day, I started feeling uneasy. It wasn't jealousy, just a strange tug in my gut that wouldn't go away. I tried to brush it off. Linda had been a faithful wife for 30 years. I had no reason not to trust her. Still, that uneasy feeling grew stronger every night. One evening, I called Clara directly. She didn't pick up. I left a message. "Hey, sweetheart, just checking in. Hope you're doing okay." She didn't call back. The next morning, I called again, and this time, Ethan answered. He sounded polite. Maybe too polite. "Oh, hi, Mr. Benson," he said quickly. "Linda's resting. She's been helping Clara nonstop." His tone was rushed, like he wanted to get off the phone. That night, I sat alone at the dining table, staring at my food. Something didn't sit right. I looked at the photo on the wall, me, Linda, and Clara at her wedding, all smiling like nothing could ever change that happiness. I missed them. I missed how things used to be. By the weekend, I made up my mind. I decided to go see them myself, not because I doubted them, but because I missed my family. I wanted to surprise them, to show up with something special. So, I went out to my shed and found the small wooden jewelry box I'd made for Clara years ago. It was one of my favorite pieces, smooth oak, carved with tiny flowers around the edges. I polished it that night, placed a folded note inside that said, "For my little girl, always." I imagined walking in, handing it to her, and watching her eyes light up. Maybe Linda would laugh. Maybe they'd tease me for showing up uninvited, but I knew it would be a warm surprise. Before I left, I told my neighbor, Mr. Lewis, that I was taking a short trip. He asked if Linda was coming home soon. "She should," I said, smiling, though I didn't fully believe it. The next morning, I packed the box, a few clothes, and some snacks. As I locked the front door, I felt a strange excitement, like a child before Christmas. I couldn't wait to see them. I had no idea what was waiting for me instead. I started the car, turned on the radio, and began the 3-hour drive. The sun was bright, the road stretched open ahead, and I hummed along to an old song Linda used to love. Every mile felt lighter, every thought filled with hope. I didn't know that the surprise I planned with love would lead me straight into something I was never meant to see. The drive to Clara's town was peaceful that morning. The sky was bright, and the radio played soft songs that made the road feel endless but calm. I stopped once to buy a cup of coffee and a small bouquet of lilies, Linda's favorite. I thought she'd smile when she saw them. I pictured her opening the door, surprised, laughing, maybe even tearing up. That image stayed in my mind the entire drive. As I got closer to their neighborhood, I noticed how quiet everything seemed. The houses were neat, the lawns well kept, but there was something odd in the air. It wasn't just silence, it was the kind that makes you lower your voice without knowing why. Even the birds sounded far away. Clara's street was usually full of life. Kids played on the sidewalks, someone always mowing their yard, neighbors talking by their fences. But that day, it was empty, completely still. My tires made the only sound as I slowed near their driveway. Both Clara's and Ethan's cars were parked outside. That comforted me at first, at least I knew they were home. I parked across the street and stepped out with the flowers and gift box in hand. The air smelled faintly of soap and wet grass. As I crossed the road, I spotted Mrs. Griffin, Clara's elderly neighbor, standing by her garden hose. She was watering her roses, but not really paying attention to them. Her eyes kept drifting toward Clara's house. When she saw me, she froze, her face tightening. I waved politely. "Good morning, Mrs. Griffin," I said. She didn't wave back. Her mouth opened slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but then she looked down and turned off the hose. I frowned, but kept walking toward the porch. I noticed something else strange. The front curtains were half closed, not fully drawn like usual, just enough to block the view inside. From the outside, the house looked fine, but something about it felt off. Maybe it was just my nerves. Maybe it was the silence. I stepped up onto the porch. The welcome mat was new. Clara must have bought it recently. It said "Home Sweet Home" in neat letters. I smiled, imagining her excitement over small things like that. Then I heard it. A faint sound from inside voices. I paused, leaning slightly closer to the door. At first, I thought it was the TV, but it wasn't. It was two people talking, softly but tense. I couldn't make out all the words, but I caught bits of it. A man's voice said, "You can't keep this up forever." Then a woman replied, her voice trembling, "Please, just give me time." My heart skipped a beat. It didn't sound like Clara or Ethan. I told myself maybe it was a show playing in the background, but something about the tone felt too real. I took a slow breath, trying to calm down. I thought about knocking, but I didn't want to ruin the surprise. I decided to walk around the side window to peek if anyone was there. But before I could take a step, I saw the curtain move. Someone inside had glanced out. For a second, I thought it was Linda, but whoever it was pulled the curtain back fast. A shiver ran through me. I turned slightly, looking across the yard again. Mrs. Griffin was still there, staring at me now, her arms folded. It wasn't a friendly look. It was worried, almost frightened. I tried to smile again, but she didn't smile back. Instead, she shook her head slowly, like she was warning me about something I didn't understand. I turned back toward the door, gripping the handle of the wooden box tighter. My heart was beating faster now. I told myself it was nothing, that maybe Clara and Linda were just having a normal conversation inside. But deep down, I felt something wasn't right. I looked at the door one more time and whispered to myself, "It's just a surprise visit, Henry. That's all." Then, I took a step closer. I stood on the porch, unsure if I should knock or wait. The house was quiet again, almost too quiet, like it was holding its breath. I glanced at the flowers in my hand. The petals had begun to tremble slightly in the wind. My fingers felt cold, even though the sun was still out. Then, from inside the house, came a soft sound like someone moving quickly across the living room floor. My heart started racing again. I leaned forward just a little, and that's when I heard it clearly, a whisper. A man's voice said, "We shouldn't have done this." His tone was low, filled with regret or fear. I couldn't tell which. Then another voice, a woman's, replied, "Please, don't say anything now. Not yet." That voice, it froze me where I stood. It sounded like Linda, my wife. I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was Clara. But I'd known Linda's voice for over 30 years. I could recognize it anywhere. My hand dropped from the door handle. My chest felt heavy. I couldn't understand what was going on. What could she possibly be whispering about? And with who? I wanted to believe it was nothing. Maybe she was comforting Ethan or talking about some family matter. But something deep inside me whispered otherwise. Before I could move, the front door opened slightly. Just a few inches, enough for me to hear a quick breath and see a shadow move. I froze again. Then, in a blink, the door closed, almost like someone inside realized it had been left open by mistake. I was about to call out when I heard a voice behind me. "Henry! Wait!" I turned around and saw Mrs. Griffin hurrying toward me. She wasn't walking this time, she was almost running, her hands trembling. "Don't go in there," she said, breathless. "Please don't." "Mrs. Griffin?" I said, confused. "What's happening? Is something wrong with my daughter?" She shook her head quickly. "No, not your daughter, but you need to know what's been happening here." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She looked over her shoulder before speaking, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to get involved, but I've seen things these past few days. People coming and going when Ethan's not home, late at night. Your wife, she's been here almost every day, but not always alone." I blinked, not sure I'd heard her right. "What are you saying?" Her eyes filled with pity. "Henry, please, I don't want to hurt you, but something isn't right in that house." I wanted to tell her she was mistaken, that maybe she misunderstood, but my throat felt tight. I remembered the whisper I'd heard through the door, Linda's voice, the man's voice. My stomach turned. Before I could respond, a loud crash came from inside, glass breaking. Then a muffled shout, a man yelling something I couldn't make out. Mrs. Griffin gasped and grabbed my arm. "Stay back," she said. "Henry, please, let the police handle this." "Police?" I repeated. My voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. She nodded quickly, panic flashing in her eyes. "I already called them. I didn't know what else to do. I thought something bad was happening in there." I stared at her, unable to speak. The house that once felt like home now looked strange, cold, unfamiliar. My mind was spinning, my body frozen. Then another sound came, footsteps rushing, a door slamming inside, and a faint cry that sounded almost like Clara's voice. I wanted to run in. Every part of me screamed to protect my daughter, but my legs wouldn't move. Mrs. Griffin's grip on my arm was firm, her eyes begging me to stay still. The world around me seemed to slow. The flowers slipped from my hand and fell onto the porch, their stems breaking as they hit the ground. Somewhere in the distance, faint but growing louder, came the sound of sirens. I didn't move. I just stood there, staring at the door, waiting for someone, anyone to tell me this was all a mistake. The sound of the sirens grew louder, echoing through the quiet street. Red and blue lights began to dance across the walls of Clara's house. Mrs. Griffin still held my arm, her face pale and wet with tears. I couldn't move. My feet felt rooted to the ground. Within seconds, 2 police cars stopped in front of the house. The doors flew open and officers stepped out quickly, one of them speaking into a radio. Neighbors began to appear on porches, whispering to each other, eyes wide with curiosity and fear. "Sir, please stand back," one officer said firmly, approaching me. His name tag read Nolan. His voice was calm but urgent. "We've received a call about a possible disturbance. Are you the homeowner?" "No," I said quietly. "My daughter lives here. My wife, she's inside." He gave me a sharp look. "Your wife's inside the house?" "Yes," I nodded. "She's been staying here for 2 weeks." Detective Nolan's expression tightened. "All right. I need you to stay right here." He turned to his partner. "Check the back entrance. I'll go through the front." My heart thudded so hard I could feel it in my neck. I wanted to follow, to know what was going on, but Mrs. Griffin whispered, "Don't, Henry. Please, let them handle it." The next few seconds felt endless. The officers moved toward the door. One of them knocked loudly, calling out, "Police! Open up!" No answer. Then a second, harder knock. Still nothing. Finally, one officer pushed the door open. It creaked slowly, and they stepped inside. The radio on Nolan's shoulder crackled as he said, "Entering the residence. Possible domestic disturbance." I stood frozen on the porch, staring at the open doorway. The scent of lilies from the fallen flowers mixed with the cold air, and the sound of my own heartbeat drowned everything else. Then I heard movement, hurried footsteps, a chair being dragged, voices shouting inside. I couldn't make out the words, but I caught one sound that shattered me. It was Clara's voice. She screamed, "Dad, don't come in!" I tried to rush forward, but Nolan appeared in the doorway, raising a hand. "Stay back, sir!" His voice was firm. Behind him, 2 more officers were helping someone sit down on the couch. I saw a glimpse of brown hair. Linda's hair. She looked pale, shaken, her hands covering her face. Another officer came out from the hallway, holding Ethan by the arm. His face was red, his shirt torn, and he looked furious. The officer kept a steady grip on him. "We found them arguing in the back room," he said quietly to Nolan. "What happened?" I asked, my throat dry. Nolan turned to me slowly. "We're still sorting it out, sir, but there's been an incident. Looks like a domestic dispute that got out of control." I looked past him into the house. The living room was a mess, broken glass on the floor, a picture frame lying face down, and Clara sitting in the corner, crying softly. My wife was still on the couch, whispering something I couldn't hear. I felt weak. My knees trembled as I took a step forward. "Linda," I said, my voice cracking. "What's going on?" She lifted her head slowly, her eyes red and full of guilt. She opened her mouth to speak, but stopped when she saw the officers around us. Nolan touched my shoulder gently. "Sir, we'll need a statement from you. But first, let's get everyone settled." Behind me, Mrs. Griffin whispered a prayer. The neighbors stood silent, their eyes wide as the scene unfolded. The sirens finally faded, replaced by the quiet hum of police radios and soft voices. I looked at my wife again. She couldn't meet my eyes. I knew in that moment, before anyone said another word, that whatever truth Mrs. Griffin had been trying to warn me about was far worse than anything I had imagined. And as I stood there, surrounded by flashing lights and broken glass, one thought kept echoing in my mind. I had come here to surprise my family, but the real surprise was waiting for me behind that door all along. The house was quiet again after the shouting stopped. The officers had separated everyone. Clara sat by the window, shaking, while Ethan was in the kitchen talking to a detective. I stood near the doorway, watching Linda. She looked smaller somehow, her hands trembling as she wiped her face with a tissue. Detective Nolan came over to me. His voice was gentle. "Mr. Benson, I think it's best if you hear this from her." I nodded. My mouth felt dry, and my heart was still pounding. I walked over slowly until I stood a few feet from her. "Linda," I said softly, "please, tell me what's going on." She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "Henry, I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted you to find out like this." I didn't speak. I just waited. She took a shaky breath. "It started a few months ago. Ethan's been having problems, money problems. He made some bad choices at work, and he came to me for help. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to worry. I thought I could fix it quietly." I frowned. "Fix it how?" Her voice broke. "By lending him money. A lot of it. I used part of our savings." The room felt smaller. "You gave him our savings?" I asked quietly. She nodded. "I thought if he paid it back before you found out, it would be fine. But it got worse. He borrowed from people he shouldn't have, and when they came to the house today, Clara panicked. Ethan tried to hide them in the back, but one of them smashed a window. That's when Mrs. Griffin called the police." I stared at her, trying to make sense of it. It wasn't betrayal in the way I feared. It was something else, a chain of bad decisions built on love and fear. Clara came over then, tears streaming down her face. "Dad, Mom just wanted to help me," she said softly. "Ethan made mistakes, but she didn't mean to hide it from you." I looked at them both, my wife, my daughter, and felt the weight of 30 years of family, love, and silence. I didn't yell. I didn't walk away. I just sat down beside Linda and held her hand. "Next time," I said quietly, "we face it together." Outside, the sirens faded completely. Inside, for the first time that day, it was silent, not heavy, just honest.